I kind of hope that this was one of those things that I hoped for that didn't happen. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing this in-depth review of this suspension kit that I unboxed in my previous video. Let's get straight to the point. We will look at some small details and compare these kits. So I'm moving away from this H&R kit to this Sachs-ZF. Well, I have discovered a couple of things, so I'm going to just basically talk about the similarities and differences. As far as the mechanics and construction of the kits go, I am not going to talk about the obviously about how these kits compare when you have them on the car and how they compare ride-wise. They are more or less identical but slightly different, so I'm kind of expecting, what am I expecting? I'm expecting them to ride about the same with one minor difference, I guess. This kit has non-adjustable shocks and struts. This kit has adjustable struts and shocks. Okay, so here's the H&R kit rear parts and here's the Sachs-ZF. So the factory design of this BMW chassis is the separate shock and the separate spring are used. So they are not true coilovers, I guess. So let's talk about the shocks first. The obvious difference is that this shock doesn't have any dust boot or bump stop included. You have to reuse your factory dust boot and bump stop. This shock has dust boot and the bump stop is integrated. Also, obviously, this is a regular type of a shock, meaning that this is the way it mounts, this is the bottom, this is the top. On this shock, this is an inverted design, meaning that this is the top of the shock, this is the bottom, so the dust boot is on the bottom and the bump stop is integrated, like I said. So this will be your upper shock mount, that's where it goes. This is going to be your rear lower shock mount, and the obvious thing is that this is not an adjustable shock and this one is. Here's the adjuster again on the bottom. It's accessible. You don't have to compress the shock, unlike the H&R Coney yellows. Those internally adjustable, that's a nightmare. So these shocks are adjustable from the outside. You don't have to get into the inside of the trunk like some shocks. So this is external adjuster, okay, and it's accessible. You probably don't even have to raise the car to do the adjustments if you can reach this. So that's a good thing on one hand. On the other hand, it's going to be exposed to all dirt, moisture, and all the road conditions. They both say made in Germany. This one says German engineering. This one just says rear shock absorber made in Germany. All the mounting diameters and the threads are identical. This is a 10mm shaft, and so it's going to be a 10mm by like 1 pitch knot. So you can reuse your factory OEM upper mounts. And this shock comes with a nut, which is exactly the same pitch, size, diameter, and pitch as this. So I'm going to probably reuse this. And the bottom, naturally, it's the same size threads. So these nuts that you use on factory shocks, they are reusable. So I cannot really do any more measurements on these shocks. I mean, I can measure and say that and tell you all that this shock, the shaft is 14mm and the main body is 40mm. So this shaft here is 16mm. So this shaft is 16mm, this shaft is 14mm, so this is a beefier shaft. Well, I can do a measurement of this outer shell, I guess. That's a 50mm shell here, or the body, the main body of the shock. So I guess what I'm trying to say, I don't know what the internal design is like, so 50mm here, 40mm here. So the last thing about these shocks, when we compare the design, is that this design has more chances of dirt and everything getting onto the shaft and wearing it out, because, well, there is a seal here, but the way it's mounted, it's not a sealed dust boot, so it's just basically exposed to more or less everything that you have on the road. I mean, it's covered by the dust boot like this, but it's got a huge hole right here, so anything that circulates around can actually get up there. There's a slight chance, I guess, of that wearing out compared to this, where you have it's upside down, so the dust would probably not be, or the dirt would not actually be collecting on this ledge like here. So the rear springs, let's talk rear springs here. There is an obvious difference here. This is a one-piece spring This, on the other hand, is more of a true coilover race type of a setup. It's got a linear spring. This is a 60mm inner diameter spring, so you can actually buy these, and if you feel like you want to do some adjustments to the spring rates, you can easily do this on this kit. So there is a helper spring, 60mm too. The obvious difference is the way these two are installed. Again, this is upside down compared to H&R. The H&R spring is has a flat top. It's not flat on the bottom, so it's reusing the factory lower spring seat. So this is the factory piece that goes into the control arm. The upper seat of the spring is this adjuster, which is an aluminum piece that takes place of everything factory. On this one, it's all upside down. And here is a problem that I ran into. This whole thing is mounted this way. So this is the top, this is the bottom, and the adjuster on this spring is on the bottom. So this adjuster goes into the control arm. It's got these two large nuts that you actually install onto the control arm, and this is the lower seat, and that's what makes the adjustment. So you basically stick a hex in the back of this screw, and you just turn this lower seat of the spring and you do the adjustment, which is more convenient because these are really difficult to get to. Here's the problem that I ran into when I installed this kit. I got rid of all of those factory pieces that I had on the top. I just tossed them. I kind of don't like clutter, so I figured unless I'm just forgetting and it's somewhere around here, which is highly unlikely. In any case, I got rid of the factory stuff. This plastic nylon washer or a ring goes into the factory steel cup that is mounted on the chassis itself, so you have to remove the rubber upper spring seat and use this. I got rid of all of those, and now I have to figure out how to either buy those again or just make something myself similar to this seat, just non-adjustable. So I'm working on that currently. So like I said, this is the top. This goes into the factory upper steel cup that is mounted to the chassis itself. Then you have the helper spring. Then you have this joint or coupler. Then it all sits on the top of the spring, and the spring itself sits on the bottom spring mount. One thing that I wanted to make a note of, that this kit, the ZF kit, doesn't have any plastic seats or washers for the springs, so it's all metal. That's kind of strange. I'm working on that, and I'm going to buy something that I will be talking about, that we'll talk about when I buy it. And I will probably, I don't know if I will do a small review, but I will talk about those things that I'm going to buy, and I'm going to improve this slightly, this situation here, because, well, metal against metal is fine, but there is something that you can do to improve this situation a little bit. The other thing that I'm going to, I guess, mention, the wire on this spring is thinner, about 11 something millimeters. This wire here is 12 something millimeters, so this is a beefier wire. They should be similar in rates, I guess, since it's, you know, the same, it's meant to be used on the same car, so the rates should be fairly close. But this is a smaller spring. The outside diameter of this, almost like a factory, like 10 centimeters, which is 100 plus millimeters. This one is being 65 millimeters on the inside, it's 80, like 82, 84 millimeters on the outside, so it's a smaller spring. Just for the fun, this is another H&R spring. This is almost a factory spring. It's basically just a lowering spring that goes in place of the factory original spring. It doesn't use any adjustable seats or anything. It's just a factory replacement with an intention of lowering your car. So it's reusing the lower rubber and upper rubber seats, and that's how these compare. So that's basically what I'm trying to say, is that that's what the factory spring more or less looks like, and that's your H&R coilover kit. Actually, this is the H&R lowering spring, and this is the ZF kit. Adjustments, this has no adjustments. It's reusing all the factory seats. This one is reusing the lower seat. It's not, and the upper is the adjuster. This one is kind of reusing the metal cup, but it's not using any rubber from the factory setup. So I guess this is it for the rear of the rear things, the things in the rear, and we'll move on to the front now. I almost forgot to put things on the scale. Here's my Chinese scale. So let's put all of these things on the scale and just see how much. So this is the rear H&R, 10.2 pounds. The shock, dust boot, bump stop, and the spring with the lower. Well, I don't know how to account for that piece of metal that's missing on that. 10.2. Now for this kit, which is way too many pieces. Everything is rolling. And the factory top metal steel cup is missing, so they're about the same. 10.2, 9.9 plus that, so it's about 10 pounds per side, I guess, in the rear. So there is no real savings of anything. There is nothing is lighter or heavier, except that this is an inverted design, so the main, I guess, body of the shock is not moving up and down, so it's a bit of a reduction in unsprung mass. But like I said, they are the same as far as pounds, kilograms go. Okay, here's the front. Let's try to make it as least painful as possible. The front seems to have less pieces to talk about. H&R kit, ZF, Sachs-ZF. So things that I'm going to mention here, I guess let's talk springs first. And as far as you can see, they are pretty much the same springs. They are about the same lengthwise. The upper coils are exactly identical in design because they go into factory upper seats. As far as the wire diameter, about 12 millimeters, slightly more than that. This is exactly the same diameter. So they are, I kind of have a suspicion that these are produced by the same company. Obviously this says H&R, this says Sachs Race Engineering. The other difference is, like I said, the height is about the same. This H&R spring has round wire all the way to the last coil. This one, on the other hand, which I like, is a flat. So the last coil of this spring is flat, which makes sense. Doesn't really make a whole lot of a difference. This looks pretty good the way it is, but from a standpoint of like engineering, this kind of makes more sense. The flat, this flat here. Now let's talk struts. This is the H&R, this is the ZF. It's easier to pronounce ZF to me, less sounds to sound out. So the obvious difference is, two obvious differences. This is a non-adjustable strut. It's got this mounting, the bottom, so this is a housing, and the strut itself is basically sitting inside of this housing, so that's what holds it in place. This one is, on the other hand, has the adjuster on the bottom. So this is the adjustable strut. That's one of those main differences. The other thing is, this is the aluminum housing, this is steel, so it's a good, this is good, this is not bad, but since it's steel, it has some benefits. So the main benefit, the aluminum obviously has less chances of rusting. On the other hand, this design has to use this front sway bar end link kind of a bracket that is like a machined or a cast piece of aluminum. It's a little bit weird because where the end link goes, the opening is not wide enough. It's a bit difficult, and to get a knot into, I mean, you can use a socket, it's okay, but you also have the brake line bracket that has to be attached to this point, and it's got a bigger diameter here, in the sense that this bracket is 60 millimeters in diameter, and this one is 52 all the way. If you have a clearance issue with the wheels, this may actually have a bit of a situation, may create a bit of a situation, since in my experience, this bracket is exactly where your wheel, the inner lip of the wheel goes. I'm sure it's not an intentional design. Let's move on. So this bracket is aluminum, and obviously this one is just a well-done stamped piece of steel, which I guess in this case, to me, is I kind of like this better. So the aluminum is fun and has benefits, but in real life, I kind of like this. It is a bit heavier, but well, nevertheless, I like this at this point better than aluminum. So obviously these both are inverted design, meaning the body of the strut is on the top and it's attached to the top, and the shaft itself is inside of the housing. And that's a good thing because that reduces the unsprung mass. Let's move on to some other measurements, I guess. So that's the way they sit in the hub. This one is slightly shorter. So these have internal bump stops again. So there is no bump stops or anything to reuse. They both use these dust boots. And here's the thing. This came off this strut, this came off this strut, and guys, look at what they say. H&R, H&R, part number 03, EKT1, and something else, they are exactly the same dust boots. That's what I was trying to, I guess, say or make a point of, that they kind of I'm kind of suspecting they are made by the same company. Don't know if this is the manufacturer and the H&R kit is just using these struts. Kind of suspect that's the way it is, because this is a smaller company, this is a larger company. H&R is known for the springs and spacers mainly, and so they might not be manufacturing struts and shocks. Kind of makes sense. As far as the lengths, this is a little bit longer. Again, this one is 350 millimeters overall. This one is almost 370 millimeters. So this one is almost by the H&R strut is almost by 20 millimeters shorter. It's almost 20 millimeters shorter than this. Well, 15, I would say, about 15 millimeters. So that's one of those differences. This is important. This is a 14 millimeter and this is a 14 millimeter mounting stud. The threads, this is M12 and this is M14. So this is a bigger knot, this is a smaller knot, so this is the knot that belongs to this strut. So you cannot use that knot here. 14 millimeters, 12 millimeters. So that's, yep, that's 14 millimeters. And naturally you're using, so this knot is a 22 wrench hex. This one is 19 millimeters, so that's 19, 22, so 19 millimeter socket for this to remove and install. This diameter here is 40 millimeters, this diameter here is 40 millimeters. So as far as the strut body itself, it's 40 millimeters on both of them, so those are the same. The other thing is that the threads are not the same on these. So this is a 52 millimeters diameter by 2 millimeters pitch. I think it's 1.5, not 1.75. I didn't bother to, because I don't care. This I had to get the readings off because I have ideas here, right? So these seats are the same style design. Again, the H&R kit has this plastic washer that it came with. This one doesn't have any. So this spring goes over like this, and it's just basically sitting here. So it's kind of okay, but it kind of looks scary to me. And also, this seems to be moving slightly this way, and I don't like it. This shouldn't be happening. I don't know if that bothers anyone or not, or makes a difference or not. I don't like it. I just don't like it. So that's one of those things that I kind of hoped for, that this would be a little bit better of a design, but it is not much different from that. And also, this doesn't have any of those plastic washers or seats to help with the noise, I guess. So, well, let's talk about this spring. So it just goes over like so. The thing that I don't like is that this spring has way too much freedom to move. I don't know if I can demonstrate this better, but that's way too much movement. I guess when you load this all down, and it's not going to shift. I think that's what the German engineers figured. But again, I'm not convinced 100% that this is a good idea. Well, here's another way to demonstrate this. I don't know if I can actually show what's inside of this. I don't know if my camera is going to focus on this. Right here. That's the movement I'm talking about. So it's kind of like really, and there's nothing, no rubber, no plastic or anything to really make this quieter. So like I said, I hope that this doesn't really do any shifting while it's loaded. And also this seat much smaller in diameter than the coil of the spring. So if I was designing this, I would make this knot at least bigger in diameter, so it actually supports the spring with 100% of the surface coverage. This one is about, if anything, 50%. I guess my mentality is to over-engineer things when I engineer things, and this obviously is a bare minimum, I guess, in my opinion. So I guess I'm going to give you a couple of hints what I'm thinking here. I had these energy suspension coil insulators, spring insulators from like years and years ago. They just perfectly fit inside of this spring. Look at that. That's just an exact fit. And then this will go over, and it still has some room to move a little bit around, but at least it's going to be a polyurethane, sort of a kind of a rubber-like seat. So that's one way to improve this situation, and I'm kind of thinking that's probably the least painful. The thing number two that I can do, I can get a matching 60 millimeter, is it 60 or 65? I get a matching spring like this and replace this with this, and this spring fits like a glove over this strut, and that could be a good way of actually doing this. So that's obviously the way this really should be. This is just that would be like almost a real coilover kind of a construction, instead of like using these springs that are, they're okay. You can do something like this with these springs, struts. Yeah, I don't see why not. And now let's go for the measurements. So the H&R kit, which is aluminum, is going to be 8.8 pounds. That's kind of expected, aluminum, not heavy. And this steel construction kit, or the strut and spring assembly, should I say, 11 pounds. 8.8, 11, so that's the difference. 2 pounds, right? 2.2 pounds. 1 kilogram per side, 2 kilograms for the front. So this is definitely heavier, but it's also adjustable. And potentially I don't know if replacing this spring with a 60 millimeter spring is actually going to give me any reduction, because those springs are in general less. So I suppose this is all that I wanted to mention in this video. This is the current situation. So like I said, there's a few things that I still need to figure out in order to install this kit on my car. I'm really curious to go for a ride, go for a drive and see how this all works. So I guess this is it for this video. I hope you got some good ideas or some useful information out of all this. Thank you for joining me on my channel and watching my videos. If you have any comments, just leave them in the comments section, and this should be it for now, for today, for this video. Again, thanks for watching, and I will see you sometimes in the future. I guess a bonus material just to see how this big spring compares. 3.8 pounds, and if I replace this ever with a 60 millimeter spring, that's 2.4. 3.8, 2.4. So I can actually drop the front weight by that difference if I replace this spring in the front with a 60 millimeter spring. So this is a much lighter.